Right, hello and welcome back to our professional development video. We are going to get started where we left off. Okay. We are going to talk about what is our campus vision. So to recap on what we were talking about, our vision for HES is to equip every student to strive to become lifelong learners. So we had talked about closing the learning gaps and building on our foundational levels and building up to help our students strive to student success. Okay. And then now we're going to talk about differentiation to help equip our students to become our lifelong learners and closing our learning gaps. To introduce differentiation, we are going to watch a video and it's called Be a Mr. Jensen.
I have a lot of memories from when I was a child. One that's always stuck out to me, though, was when I was about 10 years old and I was in school and I struggled. And I didn't struggle with English, math, or science. I struggled holding still. And I would try to listen and focus and process ideas, but I couldn't help myself. And to be honest, I would sit there and then I would just start tapping. And the students in the class would look at me and they'd say, "Hey, stop tapping." A lot of the time, I didn't even realize I was doing it. And then eventually even the teachers got after me and they would yell at me and they'd say, "Clint, you have to stop tapping." It got so bad that I got sent to the principal's office for tapping. And he said to me, "Okay, maybe when you go back to class, just try sitting on your hands." So I did. I went back to class, and when I felt myself starting to tap, I did this. I sat on my hands. And that worked for about 5 seconds. One time I was tapping in class and my teacher, Mr. Jensen, he looked at me and he yelled. And he said, "Clint, stay after class." And I thought to myself, this is it. I am done. Now, I've always been the type of person that believes that a single moment in time can change a person's life. And this was one of those moments for me. And I will never forget it. So I was sitting there with Mr. Jensen and an empty classroom. He walked past me and he sat next to his desk and he said, "Clint, come here. I want to talk to you." And as he looked me right in the eye, he said, "No, I need you to know something. You're not in trouble. But I do have just one question that I have to ask you." And he asked, he said, "Have you ever thought about playing the drums?" And in that moment, Mr. Jensen, he leaned back and he opened the top drawer of his desk. And he reached in and he pulled out my very first pair of drumsticks. He held them in his hands and he looked at me and he said, "Hey, Clint, you're not a problem. I think you're a trouble." That moment on, I've never put those things before. Recorded and played drums all over the world. Education was paid for with drumsticks in my hand. Just because of a single moment in time, somebody believed in me. He saw something in me that I didn't even see within myself. In that moment, I learned that there's a difference between being the best in the world and being the best for the world.
All right, so after watching that video, I think it kind of ties in really of being able to see differentiation and what it brings forth for your students. You have to be able to recognize that every student learns differently, and you as a teacher have to learn how to help that student and what tactics and techniques and strategies are you going to help that student be able to fill their learning gaps. So talking about what is differentiation, I think it's teaching the same material to all students, but using a variety of instructional strategies. So having your teacher's toolkit of what works best for this student, but not necessarily this student, and being able to reach out to all of your students that are needing help. Also, knowing your Bloom's taxonomy questions and levels will help you be able to differentiate different how order thinking skills and what works best for which student and what level they are able to be successful on for your lessons and activities or center work. So there are 4 different ways that you can differentiate. There is product, content, process, and environment. Okay, so we're going to talk about each of those topics. Differentiation content is kind of how the activities are presented. So it's kind of the curriculum is how the students access and use it. Content can be differentiated according to readiness, interest, and learning abilities. Content can be differentiated by matching vocabulary words to pictures. Students read a passage of text and answer questions, identify author's point of view, provide evidence to support viewpoint, and create a presentation by summarizing the lesson. So the content is kind of how your students are learning your curriculum. Okay, differentiation process. Process can be differentiated according to readiness, interest, and learning ability. It's how teachers sequence learning to achieve student success and learning goals. Different ways that you can do that is by providing textbooks for visual and word learners, allow auditory listeners to listen to audiobooks on Epic, give kinesthetic learners hands-on learning materials to create interactive learning. So the process is how the students are going to achieve their success and close the learning gaps. So I think really this is done in center work or stations, and having students being able to go to their station and complete their literacy center successfully or their math center successfully and staying on task and having really hands-on learning materials that they are successful on. Okay, our differentiation product. The product can be differentiated according to readiness, interest, and learning abilities. How learners show their demonstration of understanding. Different ways that you can do this are students can read and write during learning stations on Seesaw. Visual learners can create an illustration of a story. Auditory learners can give a class presentation. Kinesthetic learners can build a diorama illustrating a story. So the product is really, the kids have kind of mastered this in centers. They've mastered it in your learning, in your lesson, and they are ready for kind of showing what they know. It can be an assessment type piece that you want to see that they can do independently. So I know a big thing in our campus is Seesaw, having students being able to go to their literacy or their math station and independently do a Seesaw activity without any assistance, recording themselves on a video and completing an activity or recording them reflecting on a story, sharing with their knowledge and their understanding of a story, and verbally giving that presentation. Also, having learners come up to the front of the room and share their journal piece, their writing for the day. I know in pre-K, that's a really big thing, is if they can draw their picture and able to identify their pieces of their picture and, kind of tell you what they drew. And it's showing that they're able to take in what you're teaching and kind of reflecting what they know. So that's kind of their independence there. Okay. Okay. A really big part of differentiation, I believe, is the learning environment. Your learning environment can be differentiated according to learning abilities. How learning is structured within the classroom. Create a flexible seating classroom, so providing students with options for seating. I know in a good pre-K classroom, you have your reading library. The kids like to get yoga mats or their reading buddy, and they like to read a good book that interests them with pictures. They're able to identify that picture and what they're doing. Having even rug time, and then have them move about on the rug and then going to their tables is allowing for different seating arrangements. Even stools are good, bouncy balls and wobbly stools are good for kiddos to kind of move around and able to stretch their muscles, and move around the room and not sitting still constantly. So Bloom's taxonomy is kind of a big engagement piece within our lessons, and I think it helps create hands-on lesson plans to help differentiate for all of our learners. I think the big piece of the educator's goal is to encourage higher order thinking skills by building up from the lower order thinking skills. So you want to fill your foundational piece with remembering and recalling facts and showing that knowledge. And then once you're able to do that, you can build up to your understanding, which is grasping the meaning of instructional materials and able to, relate to a friend or a peer or a teacher. Hey, I'm understanding what we just read, or I'm understanding the letter that we're learning for the day. I can tell you the sound that it makes and the beginning sounds of words that start with the same letter. Applying, it's using the information in a new but similar situation. So they are actually applying, I know letter A, I can go write letter A. I can tell you words that start with A. So they're applying, they're remembering what it looks like, and they're understanding that, hey, this is a letter, not a number. So they're applying that into their journal writing, or they're, sharing it in their centers, being able to say, this is letter A today. So applying that within their centers. Analyzing, so taking apart the known and identify relationships. So they are analyzing, say, in their centers. Letter A is in this word, cat. Letter A is in the word apple. So recognizing that A is in all these different words, and maybe they're having that in their writing center and they're finding all the letter A's. So evaluating, examine information and make judgments. So evaluating piece might look like having letter A in a baggie, maybe, of finger paints, and they're writing A. And then they're thinking of words that have A in there. So they're thinking, oh, cat, I could sound that out. Then they could do maybe on a data sheet, they're writing the words down that they're thinking of that they're writing in their baggie. Creating, using information to create something new. So say for letter A, they are connecting all of what they've learned, their letters or sounds, and it makes a word, and they are creating a sentence that have words with letter A in it. So going back to the level of Bloom's from lower to higher thinking skills, we have remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. Okay. Since we've talked a little bit about differentiation, we're going to go into our curriculum and what that consists of. Okay, so for the pre-K curriculum, we have CLI Engage. CLI Engage provides a comprehensive and resourceful online classroom implementation, resources for course curriculum and testing. The pre-K curriculum for CLI Engage consists of the scope and sequence, the theme guides, and circle testing. So we're going to talk a little bit about what each of those pieces look like pre-K. So first we have our scope and sequence through CLI Engage. This can come in a manual or you can pull it up online, cliengage.com, and you can go to pre-K curriculum and click under scope and sequence. It can be under weeks 1, I believe, all the way through 36. And it pulls up every lesson plan that you are ideas that you could pull from with the pre-K guidelines. So pretty much going back to what exactly our scope and sequence is, it's a primary curriculum component designed to ensure comprehensive coverage of pre-kindergarten skills across the school year. It's flexibly designed, allowing teachers to select activities for lessons that are introduced, practiced, and reinforced. Components consist of target lessons, step it up, and additional lessons. So there's 3 components that you can choose from for your lesson plan for the day. So typically I go to the target lessons. You can use each lesson with all students 1 or more times a week to ensure skill coverage and progression. And then if once your students say have mastered the target lesson, then you can go to the step it up lesson, which is kind of a higher order Bloom's level thinking. So step it up are optional lessons that help students benefit for more challenging tasks than included in the target lessons. So like I said, it's a higher order thinking level than just your typical pre-K target lesson. It's higher up. All right, and then if you reach your target lessons, your students have mastered that. Your step it up lessons, if your students have mastered that, then you can just go to the additional lessons, and then that kind of ties into reviewing the previous week's curriculum. So it's target lessons that are from previous weeks in the curriculum. So it's just pulling back into what we've previously taught, and maybe it's helping some students that are still struggling with a specific topic and going back and trying to help those learning gaps. Okay. Moving to our theme guide. So the theme guides are within the scope and sequence. It's typically 4 weeks per theme, and it's just different topics that are covered, like community helpers or back to school or plants, just different themes within the school year. So the theme guide is for whole and small group support lessons to directly support each theme topic and are intended to supplement the weekly scope and sequence. Theme extenders include suggestions on how to provide meaningful connections between the learning objectives in the weekly scope and sequence. Provides recommendations to 8 key learning centers, our ABC Center, Construction, Creativity, Library and Listening, Math, Pretend and Learn, Science, and Writers Workshop. So within our theme guide, you have planned out lessons that you can choose from to help kind of tie in your theme for the week or the month. And then you have learning centers within that that can be great ideas for you to use in your center to tie in, oh, we're doing community helpers this week. We can tie in fire painting. We can do baggy, and then we can have like red and orange paint, and we can have the students pick a letter that's in the has a fire as a background, and it's say letter A all the way to Z, and they pick that letter and they can finger paint within their baggie. So some ideas like that. Okay, and then we're going to talk about our circle testing. Okay, so within CLI Engage, we have the scope and sequence for our curriculum and the theme guides that align to the pre-K guidelines. And then you have circle testing, and all of your students will be in this program, and we will test certain pre-K guidelines that they should be learning. Okay, and we'll see how they do with that. But to go into more detail of what circle testing is, it's kind of an assessment data that is tested in the beginning of the year, middle of the year, and end of the year. Each test is given in 3 different waves, testing multiple strengths and weaknesses for each student. CLI collects assessment data to help early childhood teachers understand student skill levels and individualize instruction to support areas in which students are at risk for falling significantly behind. Also, teachers can track developmental milestones, and it makes it far more likely that teachers will catch cognitive and physical delays that can be remediated with early intervention. Formative assessment is also beneficial for teacher professional development by tracking the use of quality teaching behaviors and setting goals for improvement based on results. So this test is given at the beginning of the year, middle of the year, and end of the year. And it's within, say, waves 1, 2, and 3. And students will be tested, say in wave 1, over all pre-K kind of guideline expectations and see how they do. And now it will show strengths that the student has succeeded in green. And then in their weaknesses, it will show them in red. And you can you'll have an outline, all your students' names, and then it will show, say on letter sounds, this many students are green and then this many are red. So it will show you where your students are needing areas of growth in. And it's really great for teachers to be able to look at this data and say, this student's in red, I need to pull this student for small group intervention. This student is in green, I don't need to worry about them. They are ready to move on to some more difficult tasks and moving on. So it's a really great testing tool for pre-K teachers and students. Okay. We are trying to think. Okay, also, I want to go back to this. The assessment shows your strengths and your weaknesses in your students, but it also shows like physical developments. You also test your students on fine motor, just kind of showing that your student is exactly where they should be for pre-K and on level. And then it say after you see that they're on level, then you can see what areas they can grow in. So you're making sure that they are where they need to be at that level of pre-K. Okay. So moving on to our next topic. Okay. I wanted to talk about planning learning community, or PLCs. We meet once a week, and I think this is very vital to not just pre-K, but to every grade level to meet for PLCs. It's a group of educators that meets once a week to discuss student learning needs, behavior concerns, and teaching strategies. You can also discuss response to intervention, or RTI. And then from that is formed the MTSS committee. So the PLC, the purpose of this is to meet once a week. And you talk about really the teacher's choice of what students he or she feels that is needed to talk about a specific student. Students that are mainly brought up in this meeting are students that are needing intervention or small group time. So that is documented within this meeting of what this student might be struggling in. And during this meeting, the other teachers can throw out ideas, or the principal can say, okay, it's time for this student to be documented and kind of put in RTI. But before the student is put into RTI, we have to go to the MTSS committee. And the MTSS committee is a committee that decides this student needs to go to RTI to between 2 to 5 times a week. And they will be pulled out by a different teacher, math RTI teacher or a ELA teacher. And this student will be pulled out of the classroom to go see these teachers. But also the teacher, the classroom teacher, will still pull the student needed within the classroom for small group time. So this committee, MTSS committee, will decide specifically if the student needs RTI or not, and how often if they get into this program. Okay. So pretty much to get into MTSS and RTI, first thing you're going to want to do as a teacher is analyze your student data. Okay. And this is going back to the CLI gauge. Like I was talking about earlier, it has your strengths in green, like the darkest green, and then there's a lighter green, and it just like fades. The more that the student is lagging in, needing as a weakness. And then there's red, which is a absolute weakness that the student is struggling in and is needing some intervention too. So pretty much you gather student CLI testing data and report their strengths and weaknesses. So you, like I said, you do that from this report. It shows green and red, pretty easy to read. And it specifically, it shows their vocabulary, their rapid letter naming, there's onset rhyme, alliteration, and syllabication. And then it even goes into math and say rote counting or object counting or addition or subtraction. So what specifically they are needing small group intervention time in. So once you gather that data, you are going to want to pull that small group intervention for students' weaknesses. Typically, the classroom teacher starting out pulls that student 2 times a week to help grow and develop in the lagging area. Okay. While you were doing that, you were going to document all small group intervention times that are pulled, what time, what day, specifically what target area the student is working on, and if they're being successful within that group time or not. Okay. If you feel that the student is not showing any growth with what you're working on, you will scan the document that you've been working on into DMAC. That will then refer students to MTSS if no improvement is shown within 6 weeks. So you're working with your student, say for 6 weeks. And then after that 6 weeks point, you will then refer that student in DMAC with all the documentation in DMAC to MTSS. And then the MTSS committee will meet and discuss each student submitted into MTSS and decide the proper academic placement for RTI. Okay, so after that student is placed into RTI, you're going to want to set goals for each student. And I think you should have goals set for each student. You can have goals set. They can set their own goals and what they're wanting. They know that they are needing growth in. And I think that makes them want to be held accountable more for their academics, as if they are involved and they are seeing their goal visually and what they are needing to do to create that expectation of they're getting on to the closing the learning gap onto that level of where they need to be. Okay, so we're going to set goals. We're going to have students that are pulled for small group intervention are to be pulled at least 2 times a week and documented. That's our teacher goal. Students that are placed into RTI are pulled by intervention teachers 3 to 4 times a week. Students are still to be pulled by the classroom teacher 2 to 3 times a week. All intervention pulled by teachers are to be documented. So the classroom teacher will document, as well as either the math RTI teacher or the ELA art teacher will document on what the student is working on specifically and what is done. RTI is a need for students needing extra help. We want students to gain as much guidance and instruction as needed. Once students have closed the learning gap, we want them out of RTI. Once they have cleared that learning gap, they need to come back into the classroom and gain their mainstream classroom instruction. They are ready to move on and tackle their next learning goal. Okay. So we have, going into this, we do have academics, which has been our main focus. We started off at tier 1, and then we move into tier 2 and tier 3. And within each tier, we have, of course, goals for each student. So in tier 1, we have benchmark all students 3 times per year for academic universal screening. So we have our CLI engage. General education, progress monitoring, and that accountability. Identify students at risk for academic failure. So pretty much all of our students are gaining tier 1 instruction. Okay, so then if tier 1 is not working, then we're going to be moving into tier 2. Which is when students will be going into the ESS referral committee. So tier 2 is assess and monitor at-risk students to determine the effectiveness of instructional changes. Okay, so tier 2, they're being pulled by a math RTI teacher or an ELA or math teacher, probably 3 to 4 times a week, as well as the classroom teacher, probably 2 to 3 times a week. And then if that is still not working for the student, then we would move to tier 3. Kind of individualized goals created for the student and are more frequently for those who need more instructional strategies. Okay, now behavior. We go into tier 1. So we are going to benchmark all students at least 2 times per year for behavior or in social skills. Identify students whose social skills and social emotional behavior problems could interfere with learning. So a good thing about the CLI Engage assessment that is given within the beginning, middle, and end of year waves, it asks you as a teacher how the student is doing within the classroom. So it's already kind of telling you this student is on grade level, or this student is needing some focus area, some growth here on their behavior. If you're noticing that your student is needing some more intervention, say with being pulled by the counselor or a behavior interventionist, Then you would move to tier 2 behavior. You identify the appropriate behavior and social skills interventions with the user-friendly tool. So you set up behavior-based progress monitoring. So you are trying to find out pretty much what works for this student. Whether that be, I know a big thing in our campus is double dollars. So every kid, um, can have a double dollar and then they can go to the double dollar store and they can buy, say, a toy or a prize. They're working for their reward, but it might work for their behavior and keep them in check. Hey, I'm going to get a double dollar if I sit on the rug today. Or if I start acting up, Miss Cummings is going to take away my double dollar. Okay, but also, you're documenting what is working and what is not working for this behavior, okay, for this student. And then you would move into tier 3. Monitor students with severe behavior or emotional issues that are more frequently, and then you kind of refer to your behavior specialist, which will then be referred, the student will be referred to a behavior specialist and pulled out for intervention time with the behavior interventionist. Okay. So closing up our professional development, I wanted to share my favorite quote for education. It says, educating the mind without educating the heart is no educating at all. It's by Aristotle. So to me, in my opinion, if you are a teacher and you come to work every day and your main focus is pre-K teacher here, we'll go, all students today are going to learn these letters and they're going to know these sounds. And I feel like that's great. You want your students to be able to know all their letters and sounds, of course. But if you have those kiddos that aren't seeing how much you love them and how much you love being their teacher, you are not effectively teaching those students. You're teaching them that academics are important, and that's great, but you also need to show them, your love for them and your happiness being their teacher. So I feel like it's very important to come to work every day, and you are educating their minds, but you're also educating their hearts and showing them that you love them and that you're building, a relationship with them. Those are your kiddos. Okay. So I want to say thank you. Here's my information. My email is jcummings@huntingtonisd.com. My campus is Huntington Elementary, and I am currently a pre-K teacher. So thank you for your time.